Humankind, a strategy game that blends the 4X style of, say, Civilization with a lot of mechanics from other 4X games to bring an entirely unique experience all of its own. Jam-packed with a slew of cultural options, all of which are based off of actual historical representations throughout the many eras, Humankind delivers a beautiful and modern approach for both veteran and new players alike. But with that, there is a lot of information to take in on your first go-around, and if this is your first 4X game, you might miss a few options here and there that the tutorial might have missed. Now, I'm going to be totally upfront with you. The tutorial for this game is quite good, and the layering of the various mechanics is done at a real measured pace, so grasping the core concept of the game should be very accessible. In this video today, though, I want to go into a few things that are going to help you understand those core concepts quicker, help you progress through the early eras faster, or just things I wish I had known before starting my first campaign to give me a sense of perspective on the game. If this is your first time on my channel, the way I like to do things is upfront the knowledge in my videos. So you'll find every item I'll be covering in this list in the chapters on the timeline and the description. And if you've not yet picked up Humankind, you can use the link in my description and pinned comment to my Nexus Store. Nexus gets Steam keys directly from the developer, giving them a larger cut than Steam does, and it's a great way to support the channel. Also, if you're enjoying this kind of content, please don't forget to like, comment, and/or subscribe. I've said it once, I will say it again. I don't want to have to keep emailing Jake Paul to fight me so that I can make money, so please help a bro out. But let's get started on 10 useful tips for beginners in Humankind. And our first tip is actually going to be buried in the settings menu. So we're going to go ahead and click here and go to gameplay. So what you'll see here are a slew of options that you can turn on and off and then tweak. I'm going to link you to my good friend H for Havoc. He has a great video where he goes through each and every option and some of the ones that you should be turning on, increasing, so on and so forth. A good example here would be autosaves and autosave frequency. He talks a little bit about this and I really recommend going to that video. That'll be linked in the upper right corner. But for today, we're going to be talking about battle animation speed. So as you progress through your campaigns in Humankind, you're going to find yourself in larger and larger battles. And the ones that happen towards the end of the game, they're going to be upwards to 30, 40, 50 minutes. Well, maybe not 50, but 30 or 40 minutes in length. So helping to kind of reduce that time is increasing the battle animation speed. I like to go up to 2. That kind of keeps it at a nice pace without getting too out of control and too fast to the point where you just can't understand what's going on. But 2 is a really, really nice, comfortable level that's going to reduce a lot of the unnecessary movement time on each and every battle that you jump into in Humankind. Now, before we jump into the actual game, I want to talk about AI difficulties. You do have the ability to tweak the overall game difficulty with Hamlet at the bottom and Humankind at the top, but you have these many AI profiles that are going to be coloring the competitors within your game. And these AI profiles are either normal, advanced, or expert. And this will give the AI innate bonuses and things of the sort that are meant for just your normal kind of run-of-the-mill player, or someone who is more advanced, or someone who is an expert at the game. That is the overall aggression and the profile that the AI will take part in when you're playing against them. And it's also important that when you're playing the game, if you have the same 4 AI profiles every time, they're going to take roughly the same approach to the game. Now, that's maybe good if you want to learn things and you just kind of want to do it over and over, but more often than not, you're going to want to diversify these a little bit to make sure that you have a fun and rich experience. So if you click this bar right here, it'll tell you, hey, this is normal, and it tells you all the bonuses that come with this individual AI persona. You can click this right here, and it gives you all of the individuals that you can then select instead, if they're advanced, if they're expert, if they're normal, so on and so forth. But this is pretty crucial when you are starting out to get a good idea of how the odds will be stacked for or against you in Humankind. So jumping into the actual game, one tip I want to give is about navigation. So if you're coming over from Total War or other games from like the Paradox umbrella, then moving around the map is typically done using WASD. That is very slow in this game. Even if you just kind of go to the edge of the screen and you move around, it's pretty slow. Now, the way that you should be navigating, and the quickest way that I've found, is just hold down left click and drag. You can move it around, or press in the mouse wheel button and just move around all crazy like. Those 2 things have helped me out so much in getting around the game map, and I didn't even know it was there for 3 or 4 hours. To be totally fair, I selected the advanced tutorial and that was not discussed. So maybe it's in the beginner tutorial and I'm just stupid, so shut me up. But using left click or pressing down the mouse wheel is probably the fastest way to get around anywhere in Humankind. Tip number 7 here is about early resources. And in the early game, don't worry about finding a resource, or a luxury resource as it is called. It's more important to progress from Neolithic to Ancient as fast as you can. You'll be able to trade any resources that you might need, or you'll discover them once you reach the Ancient era with your scouts. I mean, for instance, I wanted to go into heavy cavalry and I didn't start with horses near me. I was lucky enough to find one a few sectors away, but you don't need it to start your first city. There's plenty of opportunities to gain those resources. As you can see here in the starting area, we don't have any luxury resources. We'll probably find them as we move north, west, or east, and we might find some deposits, which are the other resources that you can encounter. But like I said, it's not important. Just progress from Neolithic into Ancient so that you don't get boxed out of a culture that you want to select. Our next tip is about choosing cultures, and you're going to do this obviously with every era. You can see right here, this is the classical era that we're progressing to, and I'm using classical as this example for a specific reason, which we'll get to. But what you really want to make sure you're doing before you select these is make sure you take a look at this, how the actual affinity of this culture plays into the playstyle you have in mind. Because you might say, hey, I want to play the Goths, but maybe you don't want to be a militarist. Maybe you want to be an expansionist like the Romans, whatever it is. You click this little button here and you're going to get all of the information. But really make sure that you're taking a look at this cultural affinity, because the cultural affinity is then going to dictate, let's back up right here, the type of stars you get to further your culture. If you're a militarist, like we are since we're Hittites, then we get more fame per militarist star than we do any other star. And remember, you're capped at only earning rewards for stars once per turn. And it's also important that once you progress from one culture to the next, you take a look at this button. And here we are again at, this is the Ancient moving into Classical. You press this button, even if you're in Classical or if you're in Ancient, and you can see all of the cultures you can move into, so you can have an idea of what you're gonna, what cultures are on the table. Now, there's one thing I did want to say here is that you can decide, rather than choosing a new culture, to do cultural transcendence, which is just going to give you a stacking bonus to the additional fame gain 10% additional fame gain bonus multiplier. So you'll gain more and more fame as you transcend this culture. Again, we're staying as militarist and we're continuing to play that way. Again, if I press adopt though, it'll give me all of what comes here, as well as the emblematic unit, the emblematic building, and then any bonus thus of. But it's really crucial to make sure that you are focusing on the stars that are key to that culture to push you through the eras, and you don't get locked out of a civilization that you wanted to select or a culture you wanted to select. Now that you've chosen your culture and moved up from Neolithic into the Ancient era, it can be very tempting to just produce an army and go wild. Thankfully, all the units you had will immediately be converted into scouts. And that's really where you should hang out, depending upon your cultural focus. You don't want to build an army up quickly, because that will reduce your population, and reducing that population drastically can result in really hindering your growth into the classical era. You want to beat the AI to the pick of the cultures that you want, but you don't want to hinder yourself by having a standing army that just won't engage anyone until you're even at war. But I have a way around building an army in the early stages of the game, which is solved in the next tip. This one is crucial. You should be putting your scouts on auto explore. They will allow them to, go about and explore every corner of the map. So I'm going to go ahead and select this here. Let's go. And they'll randomly cut through any of the fog of war, discovering resource nodes, finding other cultures, and most importantly, automatically interacting with any of the 2 discovering events that we just saw across the map. These discovery events are huge because they result in a number of things. Gold, which is, always helpful, allowing you to auto-build buildings and pay for armies. Research, which will be added into the cumulative research points you have, progressing your technology tree faster. And lastly, troops. Remember what I was saying, this is going to help your army issue. By acquiring random deserter forces throughout the map, your scouts will effectively build you an army of warriors, which are the entry-level infantry at the beginning of the game. By the time I was ready for my first war, I had like an army of 5 or 6 warriors, giving me an edge up without spending any of my resources. I just had to pay the 1 gold upkeep per soldier. Also, like I mentioned, with the early game resources, discovering other cultures allows you to buy any exotic resources you might need to progress your infrastructure. Let's zoom out here and go over here. And just to kind of give you an example of how these warriors can come into the game, let's go right here. And you can do this with any unit, auto explore. So we'll go ahead and use this. And there we go. We got other volunteers, which were other deserter warriors, and we didn't have to, I didn't buy these guys either. So both of these units were not purchased, and all we have to do is pay that 1 gold upkeep. This is huge to giving you a leg up. One of the big unique features of Humankind is the Ideologies System. These are broken into 4 collective choices: collectivism and then individualism, homeland and world, and then liberty and authority, and lastly, you've got tradition and progress. There are then 5 sectors, kind of as it were, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, with 4 nodes in each sector to the left and each sector to the right. Basically, the further left or right you go, the more you'll focus on that bonus. The centermost region will of all 4 rows will give you 10 stability, which will help maintain the peace in your cities. Think of it as public order from a total war perspective. The next bracket you jump left or right will half the stability bonus, and you'll gain that ideological focus bonus. So, for example, I want a strong army, and that's gonna really the role I want to play. So I'll go into the next bracket for homeland, giving me 1 combat strength bonus for all my units. I'll go even further and I'll double that bonus and remove the stability bonus entirely. So this gives you a ton of ways to roleplay your civilization as it grows through the ages and eras. And each one of these will either be influenced by the occasional events, which will move an ideology by a single node or square here. But the other way to sway these ideologies is your civics, which you'll gain more of over the many turns. One thing to note though here about civics and how they influence ideologies, you can cancel any civic. You can just press this button right here and then swap it to the other one. So this gives you a choice to remove a specific ideological focus in your playthrough in case you want to pivot towards the later game. Number 2 here is about diplomacy, and diplomacy is another huge part of the game as it's broken down into a lot of granular interactions like trade agreements or exotic resources, open trade, open borders, non-aggression pacts, so on and so forth. But be very mindful of any grievances being made on you, as well as any demands that you have out to the other AI. If you're not careful, this will build war fervor, resulting in a surprise war you maybe just weren't depending on. And in the early portions of the game, like the ancient era, that can be damning, as it will take you a considerable amount of time to get a substantial army going, and you might not even have the population to be able to support one. I mean, if you didn't listen to the prior tips, that is. But also with diplomacy, know that any time your proposal is rejected or you reject an AI's proposal, you're going to hinder your relationship with them. Those of you coming from the Total War series are probably used to just going down the list of AI and proposing all sorts of deals under the sun. This will in fact hurt you in Humankind, especially if you're spamming it. Now, our last tip here is about war support, and we just touched on this a little bit, but you've probably noticed the war support gauge in the diplomacy screen, right up here at the very top, especially if you are playing a militaristic culture. Eventually, you will come to blows with another faction on the map, and for me, it was Mycenae, as I was playing as the Hittites. And as you fight each other, you'll gain war support if you win battles, occupy cities, ransack settlements, and destroy armies. Conversely, you'll lose support if you lose any of these engagements. If either force runs out of war support, then it forces a surrender, and then it kicks you into this, the war resolution. But what's important here, and why this is a tip, is that war support acts as a currency for you to use in peace negotiations. The higher your war support, as you can see right here, it's at 170, then the more cities you can grab, the higher likelihood to vassalize your opponent or secure more of their outposts. Also, any outstanding demands that you have prior to the war kicking off will be factored against your war support total first before you can select others. So you can see here, I'm going to go ahead and choose this location and then maybe just this outpost, because we can't go any further here because we only have 39 war support left, which is nice, but we'll still get 195 gold in reparation. But the important thing here is to note that you can really get a lot of your enemy's holdings by maximizing your war support before you jump into a force surrender. And conversely, if you are not watching war support, like I said earlier in diplomacy, you might find yourself in a spontaneous war that you didn't plan for, especially if you're not a culture that's geared towards defending or conflict in general. So keeping an eye on war support is going to be key to keeping your civilization alive. Last thing here as a little honorable mention is the ability to rename things. You can rename all of your cities, your outposts, your units, whatever you so wish. Just go ahead and select it. You'll see the name of it right here. You just go to the left, you'll see this rename button. You'll just click that. Go ahead and type in test. We'll press this button and that will confirm it. Or say for these units right here, again, we can just go ahead and select it right here, and this is going to rename the regiment itself. Do whatever you so wish. But this was not stunningly or shockingly apparent to me at the beginning of the game, so I wanted to share this real quick as an honorable mention. And at that, it brings our list here to a close. And if you find yourself getting lost in the game at any time, there are so many resources built into the game to help you. You can press F1, hover over things you maybe don't understand with any number of menus open and selected, or even further, you can go ahead and press this button and open up the encyclopedia. So there are plenty of ways to get tons of help in Humankind. I will continue to be making some guides for Humankind, so if there's specific things that you maybe are struggling with, certain things that you just don't really grasp in the game, feel free to let me know in the comment section below. I've done the similar treatment to Crusader Kings 3 as well as Bannerlord, and something I'm very excited to be jumping into with Humankind. It is a very fun and expansive but also relaxing game. So please dive into Humankind, and if you have any questions or issues, feel free to let me know in the comment section below. I will help out to the best of my ability. But as always, guys, thank you so much for watching here today. Have a good one and take care.